Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. Today I am with Karissa. And who is Karissa? Karissa supports families in documenting the beautiful milestones of life as their personal biographer. Carissa's intention with her camera is that her subject, whether it be a family, entrepreneur, or a woman giving birth, feels seen. Much more than a collection of moments, photographs become part of a family's historic archive. And as a creative entrepreneur, Karissa has supported small businesses with strategy, branding, and marketing. Her creative nature and personal journey have led her to incorporate energy healing, meditation, sound healing, and other personal healing modalities into her work. And more importantly, Karissa is the one person I have trusted into the sacred spaces I've created for my own students, my own clients with the retreats that I have facilitated. So just know, if you are curious who it is that takes my photos and takes the photos of my clients and comes to the retreats to capture this magic, it is this woman, Karissa. Yeah. And I just first want to share my infinite gratitude for the ways that you are able to support me and so many others with being able to see that within that which we are still learning to see within ourselves. I feel like whenever I've explored other photographers, especially in the industry that I'm in, which is more coaching and business. The photos tend to be of somebody with like a fedora sipping coffee at a coffee shop in front of their laptop. And I tried that and I'm just like, oh God, this is not me. But then telling myself the story that, oh, people are not going to perceive me as professional if I'm not looking the part. And then here I see the ways that you capture people in their medicine, especially as a contribution and as an offering to their ancestors, which I feel has given me more of that permission to dress however it is I want, but also by using the ways that I show up in the camera as what it is I also want others to see within themselves. And so I'm so grateful for you, for the ways that you are just like such you're a magician behind the camera. And not only that, but you're also a birth worker. So anyways, I'm gonna scale
Oh,
back
thanks.
with my
Yes,
love
thank you.
bombs. And now that I celebrated you, I want to know, what is it that you're celebrating about yourself today?
I'm celebrating my birth. My solar return is actually on Saturday. So I'm celebrating that I'm alive. Honestly, just being able to exist in this timeline. That's what I'm celebrating.
Love it. Happy solar return.
Thank
Uh,
you.
you're welcome. And so I feel like because you wear so many hats and multiple identities,
Yes.
tell us, what is your medicine when we take away all of the titles?
My medicine I feel like has evolved, but I feel like I like to be my own. I'm visualizing myself and like this like let's say like a diffuser. I'm even like visualizing, how diffuser spews out like this like beautiful smelling aroma. I'm visualizing me showing up in any space as this like beautiful auric vessel and kind of just being who I am, and being myself as like a nurturing and very like present and calming energy, and being able to expel that throughout the room that I'm in. Like that's my medicine, is just getting to travel through all these spaces and containers in which I live and exist, and just be like, can I offer some calming? Can I offer some of my love and profound gratitude into all these spaces where maybe it doesn't exist yet, or maybe it's like stressful and tense? Like, can I just be myself and bring down that energy?
I love it. Yeah. And I love how you make us feel so safe whenever we are in our vulnerable moments, because I feel like a big fear for so many of us who are stepping into our medicine and especially choosing entrepreneurship as our form of contribution and reciprocity with the world is this fear of being seen. And so
Yes.
I love how whenever people will see the photos that I've taken and just assume that I am naturally confident without realizing there's somebody behind the camera who's talking me through my insecurities.
Yeah, being seen is hard. And I feel like when you start a business, you want to hide behind that business. I'll create a brand and I'll make a business name, and I won't be seen, but my business will be seen. But
Mhm.
where we kind of remind people, or where I like to remind folks, is that like it matters who you are. And like obviously that's what you do. You're a storyteller. Like you're like the story that you have matters and who you are matters. And I don't know how many times that I go to any website, even if it's like for a product, and I go to the about page. I'm like, who is this person? Who are they? Why did they start it? Where are they? Because all those things matter to us as like conscious consumers. Like, is it local? Is it, what are the little intentions that are inside of this product or this service that I'm investing in?
Yeah, what are these persons' values? What do they stand for? What are they against? And I feel like the first time I ever started taking photos for myself and my business, I didn't know how to pose. And I would do the duck face thing. And then when I would look at my pictures, or I just want, like, my intention was to embody the strong woman. But then when I would see the photos, I would ask myself, do I want to be around this person? I'm like, she's fierce, but maybe she's like too strong for me. And so I've also begun to step into the role of embodiment coaching. Like, what is the kind of coaching that I needed when I was being captured? And I would always ask people, and I always ask people, it's like, how do you want to make your ideal clients feel when they see you? How is it that when they come to your page and they see the picture of you, where they can say, this is a person that's going to make me feel safe, right? And so and also, like, is this person connected with their spirituality? And I feel
Mm,
like the ways that you and I have come to collaborate in capturing people in their medicine is moving beyond just taking a pretty picture, but guiding through this process where they truly feel like who it is they are when they get to see their photos afterward. And so so excited for us to just like bring more of this kind of coaching and this medicine to folks. But I want to know, uh what is your ancestral lineage, and how has this influenced your path today as both a birth worker, a photographer, and all the other hats that you wear?
yeah, so ancestrally, my ancestors are from the land that's currently known as Mexico. So Mexica identifies like Mexica Chicana. Both of my parents are there. So I'm like a generation 1.5 where my parents immigrated as children. They were very young. And then like grew up here as young adults in the 90s. So they like assimilated. I didn't learn Spanish in the home, but I learned through my grandmother who taught me Spanish because it was her primary language. And if I wanted to communicate with her, and as one of the oldest cousins, I was like the mitigator, right? I like led my younger cousin, so I had to learn to communicate with my grandma. So I'm forever grateful that I learned the Spanish that I know from her. Um, but it's really influenced my connection to where I live now, the Southern California, Orange County, where my grandfather was a bracero. So he was a migrant farm worker. He'd travel into northern Mexico, where my mother was born in Mexicali. on the weekends, and he'd travel here to Santa Ana, Orange County area, and work all the farms that were here. My mom tells this really sweet story where she remembers him coming home on a weekend and like waiting up for him because he would always bring citrus. He'd always bring orange because that's oranges, whatever he would bring, from the farms that he was on that week. And she would stay up so she could have like one of those sweet oranges. And so I love knowing that ancestrally, all of this was Mexico, all of this is native land. And so we've cared, my ancestors have cared for all of this land for a really, really long time. And my work as a birth worker and wanting to bring this work into communities of color specifically, and especially where I am in like Santa Ana and Orange County, where it is predominantly Latino, like 70% or something like that in Santa Ana, as opposed to this idea of what we believe Orange County is, which is like a very affluent, very white, like the OC and the hills and all of these like things, Laguna Beach. We have this idea of what Orange County is in our mind, but it's not the Orange County that I grew up with. And Northern Orange County, Santa Ana, Anaheim, like Garden Grove, Fountain Valley, have all these communities of color. And when I had my daughter, I was like, this community, our community really needs doulas or birth workers that speak Spanish, that understand our culture, because I didn't see it when I was having my own child. I didn't think that doulas were something that were for me. Seemed like very affluent, very like something that other people do. But through that discovery of traditional birth work and birth workers that were reclaiming traditional ancestral ways of caring for the birthing person and the postpartum body, I have just learned so much about like traditional Mexican postpartum care and medicine. And that has really influenced the way that I take care of myself and the way that I show up professionally, and weaving in all of these ancestral wisdoms into the way that we care for ourselves, our communities, and our land.
And I'm curious about your own birth story. Uh, did you have a doula when you were going through that process? So what is it that called you to become trained yourself? And do you have any formal certifications, or is this something that was passed down through your lineage or just self-taught?
Yeah. Okay, so I did not have a doula. I didn't hire a doula. I didn't really know what a doula was. But a friend of mine had her child like 3 months before I did. So I was pregnant at the same time that she was. She gave birth 3 months before I did. And so we were learning a lot together. And she had mentioned that one of her friends had a doula, and like I think through her own like lack or her own envy, she was like, they're kind of pointless. Like I could never afford one. They're like event planners, but for your birth, no, you don't really need one. It seemed like a very like goop thing. Like if you're very affluent and can afford a doula, then it's for you. Otherwise, who really needs one or something like that? I didn't really know what one was. But once I learned what a doula was through that process and through my own research, like many rabbit holes, I also realized I did have many doulas in the form of my family and community. Like my sisters-in-law, I have two sister-in-laws and sisters-in-law, and they both were like my doulas. They answered all of my questions, gave me so much advice, told me so many stories, and really nurtured me through my pregnancy and through my postpartum time. My mom was like, I moved in with my parents. My husband and I moved in with my mom and dad right before I gave birth. I was like 8 months pregnant. And so my mom, like, totally, like, she was my caregiver. She fed me and nurtured me. And then postpartum, she was totally my postpartum doula, feeding me and nurturing me and watching Olive so I could sleep. So while I didn't hire a doula, I totally had doulas in my life and family in my life that were acting as those caregivers. Um, so I loved that. But through the research, your midnight between like 12 a.m. and maybe 3, 4 a.m. when you're awake breastfeeding baby, and like changing baby all night, I would research and just learn what are doulas, and learning about herbs and medicines that I could incorporate into my life postpartum. I learned about a Bay Area midwife. Her name is Sumaya Franklin, and she goes by Sumi's Touch. And she was coming down to Los Angeles to do a training, doula training. And I was like, I want to be there. I have to be there. I should be there. I really want to learn about this. I really want to bridge close some more gaps in like the care, the conventional care that you get when you're pregnant. These like very brief visits where they're like, do you have any questions? And you're like, should I have questions? Like, what questions should I have? I don't know what to ask. And there's just so many gaps that I feel like I was able to fill partially with family. But still postpartum, I felt like, whoa, there's so much that they don't tell you, so much that they don't tell you, that I wish I could support people through this transition. And so I did her training that was like a long weekend training, maybe like 4 days or something like that. And I was a year postpartum. So I had like my daughter was like 14 months old, I believe, at the time.
And so you started off as a birth worker in your entrepreneurial endeavors. Curious, what is it that you wish you knew as a mother before you stepped into this role as a doula?
I I think what I wish I knew before I was postpartum was that like the massive amounts of grief that you could feel, almost like there's like an inner death experience. I think before I was a mother, I would see other people become mothers and I'd be like, they're not the person who you thought they were anymore. They become somebody else. They're the mom version of themselves, right? Their focus is completely shifted, as it should be, on this other person that they have to take care of full time, 24/7. You're thinking about this person. And I always felt like I don't want to lose myself so much. Like I want to still be like the Karissa I am now. Like I want to stay friends with my friends that are not parents and like stay connected to that person who was just me, like a grown-up person doing, the things that I love to do. And when I was postpartum in that first few months, I just felt so much grief, like I was mourning, like that I was never going to be that person again. Like I could no longer keep that person because she was gone. Like in my birth process of my daughter, that other person ceased to exist. And it was like a beautiful thing to birth this new version of myself. Like, wow, I'm a mom now. I was full of ideas and like full of like all this creative energy after giving birth. But I was also really sad and like really grieving that the life that I had, the person that I was no longer there. So as a doula, I would always like talk about this, and it can show up differently for everybody. It could just be some baby blues or some brief moments, but it could be, postpartum depression. It could be postpartum anxiety. It could show up in different ways. And so I would talk about it though. My sister-in-law just gave birth last week and I got to be their doula and I was with them in the delivery room. And a few days later she's like, I cannot stop crying. And people are telling her like, why are you, why, like they're concerned for her. And I'm just like, it's okay, like just feel the feels, and it's okay to feel this grief even if you're not sure why. Like it's totally okay. And just having that permission is like, okay, let me just cry it all out today and see how I feel tomorrow, or see how I feel in an hour. But just having that like permission to feel from someone who she trusts, and someone who she knows and wants the best for her. She just felt the next day like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Like everyone was telling me all these other things, and you're just like, it's okay, just feel. And, reminding her that it's okay to feel grief in a time that's so beautiful too.
Hmm. And how did this then lead into you choosing to document people's journeys? Because I feel like there's birth work, there's photography, and oftentimes we tell ourselves a story. We should only pick one thing and go all in on that. So,
Yeah.
where did that come about?
I always felt that too. Like in college, I feel like it's so hard to pick one thing. And I think that's was so challenging in my heart and my mind, was that I don't want to pick one thing. Like I love everything. And my entrepreneurial spirit has always been there, from like literally selling door to door, like tickets to my own little Spice Girls concert in my front yard. Like my neighbor girl friends and I, we would literally sell tickets so that they could come watch us dance on the front yard with, yeah, to having my own Etsy shop eventually, like right after college, to like there's so many different things that I've learned through and grown through. And I even started doing photography somewhere in there just for friends and family, but it wasn't like a business quite yet because it's always been a love of mine. And I tell that story a lot where my mom just constantly had the camera in my face, and I loved it and then I hated it and now I love it. I'm so happy that I have all the memories. I think as a teenager I was like, Mom, you're so annoying. Like, why do you need pictures of me doing everything? And now I'm like, I'm so grateful that I have all the pictures. Um, but I loved the camera ever since then. Like, I also always share that like my first purchase for my first job was a camera. I was like, I want my own camera because I always borrowed my mom. So I had a job as a lifeguard, and I got my first paycheck and I was like, I'm spending it all on a camera because that's what I want. And I did it in like high school and I did it in college. And so I always loved photography. That once I did, and I, like I mentioned, I started doing it for friends and family, but it wasn't a full-blown business. Once I did the doula training, Sumi's doula training also was so life altering because it wasn't just about learning about pregnancy and postpartum and abortion and miscarriage, because it was full spectrum. So we learned about all the things. Um, but it was also about learning about your own personal journey and dismantling ego and ego work, and your own trauma work, because how can we be in such an intimate space, right? And supporting others through what could be supporting them through their past or previous traumas, through their childbirth, if we are not in the space to do that, or showing up with our own biases, because we want folks to make their own choices, their own decisions. I'm not going to go in as a doula and be like, this is the ideal birth, like an unmedicated natural birth is the only way. It's really about holding space for whatever their journey is and whatever their choice is, providing the information and letting them choose, the informed consent piece. And so the ego work that was included in this training was something that I didn't even anticipate, but it was so important to do that work, to kind of like really go through the depths of like, what do I believe and how can I show up without those beliefs and just be a container to hold space. And so we learned briefly about like cloaking and masking, like holding our energy and doing like energy cleanses, or just being able to check in, being mindful, like the mindfulness of being able to check in like before and after a visit or before and after a birth, so that we're not carrying all of the things that happen through our professional work. But after that training, I was like, I should really incorporate the use of my camera, because it's such a tender moment and I get to be there. Like, it's such an honor and it's such a privilege to get to be by someone's side in such an intimate and life-changing experience as childbirth is. Um, and I want them to see it, because the other challenge as a birthing person is that you cannot see most of what's happening because of anatomy. You cannot see everything that's happening unless you have a mirror or something like that. I got to see my child through a mirror when I was pushing and some stuff like that, but you can't see everything. And you go to a place that we in the birth world call labor land, where everything is very intense. There's a high energy and there's lots of sensations, body sensations, and you're just not fully present. And we want you to go to like a labor land. Like, don't be fully present because there's a lot happening in your body. And so being able to capture it, and then they get to reflect on those pictures like, wow, I don't even remember that. I don't remember doing that. Then it just really gives them, those memories and that opportunity to see something that they couldn't see fully.
And whenever I see your birth photos, it's like you were able to capture moments where where the veil is literally so thin that it's more than just these human bodies that are present in the room. And so what a privilege to be able to capture those moments and witness a human being come into this earth side and take its first breath. Um, how has this then translated into the ways you've expanded beyond birth work to now capturing others in their medicine, other creative entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's all been a learning process of really trying to meet my own needs too, right? As an entrepreneur, it can be very easy to just work a lot. Like you see the memes that it's like, I left the 9 to 5 job to work 24/7. Like that's not what I want. And so birth work is can be a very unsustainable career because it's very demanding to be on call, right? So you're waiting, you're kind of on call. If you're like an anxious person, and I can be, when I was a baby doula, it can be very hard to wait. You're kind of like always on, your mind is always on, and you're always thinking about like, is it almost time? Is it time? Because you're just anticipating a phone call to be like, I think it's labor time, and it could be in the middle of the night. So when I'm on call for clients and it's getting real close to their guest dates, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and I'm checking my phone, even if I didn't hear it, because of that just like thought, like, what if I missed it? I'm checking to make sure that, it's not on do not disturb accidentally. Or now I would I turn on do not disturb my phone, but I have their calls able to come through and things like that. But I would still check it. So you learn to like, okay, I need to just like release, like it's going to happen when it happens. And I have the tools to inform me, like it's okay. I can sleep soundly through the night, but it was a practice and a learning, to learning to work with community for backups. But even so, it's just it can be very demanding based on the circumstances. If there is previous trauma, you're holding a heavier container. It's just not as energetically light. And it just became a toll on me personally, because I also was the parent of a young child. And thankfully, for 5 years, while we lived with my parents, I had childcare. But the challenge with birth workers too, if anyone's listening and is maybe considering, is childcare. And a lot of times people are new parents and they are new moms and they want to get into the work, but it's like the most challenging time just logistically because you have a young child and you might be leaving at 3 in the morning. And how do you get child to childcare, or what's the lifestyle like around it? So I was lucky enough to live with family, and just personal experiences, like having to really go through the depths of reparenting myself. So I lived with my parents for 5 years as a new mom, and it took me to my core of having to reparent myself. And I just I came to a head with all the energy and all the personal life experiences that I was like, I think I really need myself the most right now. I cannot caregive at the moment. I cannot be in such a space that I provide all of my caregiving to clients and to my child. So my time, my own energy was split between my clients, my child, and I would get what was left. And I was like, I think I need it all now. Whatever I'm not giving to my daughter, like I really do need it all. And so it was just, I decided I needed to take a pause. I don't know that I'll be done with birth work forever. I just decided I'm going to take a pause. And it was ironic because I like had increased my prices and then was getting more inquiries. I was like, this will kind of wean people off of me. I'll just get really expensive. And then I got really a lot more inquiries. So it's hard still. It's like, well, now I'm getting all these like almost work and my price is so much higher. But I just stuck to it. I was like, no, I really need this pause. I really need myself more right now. And I can nurture the photography portion of it because that's so important. It's another creative outlet.
Yeah, I feel like as creative and conscious entrepreneurs, we're back when I was working a job, I had so much fear around quitting. I was tethered to the benefits, to the steady paycheck. And now we get to create whoever it is we want to be. And so, by the way, for folks who don't know, I was a birth doula for a hot second. I did two births. I don't even count the second one because it was traumatizing. Um, I wasn't even present for it, but I didn't realize that when I was saying yes to being a doula for this family, that I was also saying yes to being let into the unhealed wounds of their own family dynamics that had yet to be addressed. And so I give so much love to birth workers. Birth workers make up a lot of my own clients as well. But how is it that we can create more sustainability, not just income wise, but with our energy? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a fear when it comes to letting it go or pivoting, which I don't even like to use the word pivoting. I'd like to say more of expanding. But we're always going to need birth workers, and we also have death doulas that are stepping in now. And so this is why, like, I call myself a self-proclaimed life doula,
Mm-hmm.
because I enjoy being present for the rebirth of people who are going through these transitions in life, through these rites of passage that we've actually lost rituals to, or that we no longer have rituals for, which is why I create these retreats. And I love calling you on as our sacred photographer so that you can capture these moments. And whenever people go back into their stories of who am I to be doing any of this work, you can look back at this photo as a timestamp and as a way to recommit to this greater vision of, like, who is the ancestor that I'm becoming. And so I love our decolonial photo shoots and all the magic that happens in those
Me
transformations. And it's just
too.
this, like, I feel like every time I've done a photo shoot, which, by the way, if people, it's for people who are asking me, like, who my agent is, like, no, I pay for this shit out of my own pocket, because for me, it's a way that I practice celebrating myself. And so I see people like Karissa as more than just a photographer, but literally as a ceremonialist that is holding space for me to shed old skin as I am stepping into this new embodiment of who it is I'm calling in next. Um, and so actually, I want to explore this with you because that's what's happening whenever we are creating, whenever you're curating these moments, is they're a rites of passage. So what do you feel is the importance of not just creative entrepreneurs, but individuals documenting these moments and calling somebody else in to do that? Because we all have our own cameras, we can take pictures off of our phones. But I guess it's like similar to being a doula, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can hit up a family member to be a doula, or back when I was a doula, when people were saying, like, is this even worth the money when I have my partner or somebody else? It's like, it's different when
Right.
you're very close to the subject. So let's go into
Yeah,
that.
that's a good point into birth work and why like having a doula would matter and be different. And I feel like it's the same with having a photographer, is that there's different skills and there's different knowledge when it comes to someone behind a camera and being able to creatively capture an image, because you're right, we all do have cameras on our phones. And I think it's amazing to be able to have that, because I was the kid in high school that constantly had disposable cameras and like a cheap, like a little point and shoot digital camera, because I was like, I'm going to document everything. I was like always the historian. I was like, I want to remember the shit. And now I can look back at like all the like Rilo Kiley concerts I went to, and like all the times I went to the Glass House, and like the random high school days, I can look back on those because I took pictures of them, like sitting at the lunch tables. And I can just close my eyes too, and I can see those things, because it's really interesting that, I really like to document things because we can remember it. It's like a memory. But it's also that our memory is like malleable. Like the things that we remember are not always real or true, which is interesting. Like I can look at a picture every day, or like I can look at a picture often of me as a child, and I can think that I remember that, but it could totally be fabricated in my mind. And so while we think sometimes like, I have a good memory, I'm going to remember that, like it can change over time, which is beneficial if you have things that you're healing from or recovering from, is that you can change the way that you feel about it based on the way that you hold that memory in your mind. Anyway, I digress. Having a photographer is having an artist, hiring a creative, an artist who sees something very specifically in a different way than you might. When I do shoots with people like in their homes, for instance, these are my favorite ones, of families in their homes, because your home is where you spend most of your time, most of it probably sleeping, but you spend most of your time in your home with your family. And a lot of times people want to go to the park, or they want to go to this beautiful space to take pictures, which I love to do too. But I love like the magic in the mundane. Like home is like you think about it as like a mundane, it's just home, like whatever. But you spend the most time there. And so there's little things that I like to ask. Like if we're taking pictures in your home, like what time of day do you get the most beautiful light? And people are like, I don't know, I don't pay attention. I'm like, where does sun travel from your home? Like, is it northeast? Or how does your home sit, and where does the sun travel? And these are things that they never think about, but these are things that I only think about. I'm like, I can only ever live in a house or in a space that gets certain sun. It's like my crazy mind. I can't live in a space that like doesn't get sun. Um, so I ask these little questions because the lighting and the warmth of that light, would produce different images versus like the very cool light of like the early morning or different times of day. Um, and so when you're hiring or working with a professional, with a creative, a professional photographer, they're going to notice those little things. It's not just going to be the picture taken at eye level of what you see, but it's a more creative vision of what their unique way of seeing the world. But I think people should become I think there's a way for people to use their phone and their camera on their phone more creatively and just to get more playful with it. And I also think that there's a balance to over documenting everything, right? So because we have our
Mm.
phones in our hands, people want to document every single little thing. And they're not fully present. So there's like it's a double-edged sword there. It's like we can capture everything. Do we need to capture everything? Probably not. And there's a few other things that come to mind, like what do we do with all these pictures we've taken? Okay, you've taken 80 pictures of your child, doing this one thing, but what are you going to do with those pictures now? Are they just going to live on your phone? If your phone breaks or die, or you lose it, are you going to lose those pictures too? So I think there's like a balance to that art.
Yeah, I completely agree. The reason why I've had to get more storage on my phone is because most of my memory is filled with photos and videos that I never look back on, by the way.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
so a lot of the photos I end up keeping are the professional ones that I've allowed others to take, such as the ones that you have captured. And so actually, let's talk about why is it important for small businesses and especially healers to be intentional about their branding and their photography.
Yeah, I mean, as a service-based entrepreneur, it's so important because you are a big part of your business. You are providing the service. And so it's so much more special to be able to say, this is me, this is how I do my work, versus this is my pretty logo, these are my pretty graphics, because people are going to work very intimately with you. Um, and you're telling the story visually. So you support people through writing their story, through saying their story aloud, right? Through writing it down, but the pictures accompany that. So I love to share that, like, it's not just the pictures, but it's like the story that goes alongside with the picture. But it's all a story. You're telling folks a story. So in the clothing that you're wearing and the way that you're choosing to accessorize and the location and all the elements of the pictures are painting a picture of who you are. And I mean, the time old saying that, you know, a picture tells 1,000 words or 1,000 stories. That's what comes through for your brand, is like, what is your brand, who is your brand, and it's accompanying your story, which is why you exist in business anyway.
Yeah, and I like to replace the word brand with vibe if branding is uncomfortable for you. So it's like, what is your vibe? What is the frequency
Yep.
that you're putting out in the world? And how is it that your picture can tell that story? And so the times that Chris and I have collaborated on documenting my clients and their journey, we invite them to dress up in honor of their ancestors. And I think it's so beautiful. I think it's so revolutionary because the ways that our ancestors would dress obviously is not accepted as the norm today. And here we are embodying the very ones that we have prayed for, like treating our bodies as this living altar and as an offering to those that came before us. And so I feel like every time that I have called you in to even document my own process, it's just been um, a whole nother invitation for me to reflect on how far it is I've come, and also where is it that I'm going in this next iteration of the legacy that I am here to leave behind. And so yeah, we have so much fun together, and I'm so excited for just the other people that we're calling in who are saying yes to their story medicine. And so, because you are a mother, a photographer, a birth worker, a wife, and so many other things, what is it that you do to stay rooted and balanced? Is there even such a thing? Like, what are some of your rituals?
Yeah, some of my rituals are um bathing, right? Taking long baths. So water and rest are like my top two. And I like to just be really like check in with myself a lot, because it's evolved over time. Having a young child, like the amount of time and space and energy I have to do my own rituals changes over time. And I've included my daughter in them, so she is very aware of like pulling cards with me, like our daily intent pool, and making a little spread with her, a little crystal grid. Like, I've just done it with her now. I'm like, if I can't step away for a moment, let me just bring you with me and teach you these things, and have her be really aware of what I'm doing. And so now the rituals are like, she knows that I do them, like lighting an incense in the morning, saying a prayer, pulling my cards, sleep. Like, she definitely she always makes jokes that I'm like a sloth, or like if we see something in the movie sleeping, she's like, "That's you, mom." Because sleep is my medicine. Like, that's where I get lots of clarity through my dreams, and I just need a lot of sleep. I'm just like a person who needs a lot of sleep, and she knows that, and I've communicated that with like my whole family. Like, they know, like, I just sometimes need to sleep or take a nap. And so sleep is my medicine too, at like being able to show up. I got not very much rest the other day, and I was so short with my daughter, and she could tell, and I was like, I didn't sleep very well. So I'm just like a grumpy mess. But really also learning about like NBC, like nonviolent communication, and has really helped too, because that's an ongoing practice in our home, is acknowledging that we all have needs and we're all trying to meet our needs day in and day out. And so with my daughter, I always acknowledge that, like, mommy has this need and I have it, like, they know if I'm hangry, I'm like, I'm very angry, but I'm only hungry. I'm not angry at you. I'm just hungry. Like, let me eat. But it's an ongoing practice that we've all been able to incorporate into our home, and reflect on day in and day out so that we can all, live harmoniously.
Yeah. And then what is it that you've learned to release?
I've learned to release the people pleaser in me over time, this idea or all the ideas that I believed that I thought I needed to be, or the ways that people think I should show up. And so as I release that version of myself and then nurture the most authentic and truest self of myself has been so freeing.
Mm. Yes, to more sleep, to more food, to more spaciousness in our life, and to being the ones that we have been calling forth. So, with that being said, I'd love to ask this last question. If you could speak to yourself as a future ancestor in this moment, or even speaking back to Karissa in all the moments where she was going through just questioning her own medicine, what is it that you would say?
I would I would tell her to just do it. Just go for it. I think there's always been a hesitancy or just kind of like a waiting. And I think what I'm learning is to just do it, just be free. And another tidbit of wisdom that my mom has given me that I have really clung to in the last few years is that the answer is always no if you don't ask. So it's like just ask the questions, do the thing. And I'm definitely more of like a ask for forgiveness and for permission. And it's been a practice, it's been a learning. Um, so I think I would just really nurture that in my younger version.
Yeah, I believe that oftentimes the answers lie in the questions. So
Hmm.
if you're not sure, ask the question, and then the answers will reveal themselves along the way. Thank you so much, Karissa, for taking time to share your story medicine with us. And for any of our listeners, just know when you are signing up for one of my programs or my retreats, Karissa is more than likely going to be there capturing you in your medicine. And it's more than just taking a picture. We're literally creating a rites of passage for people. And yeah, you get to look back on this and reflect and celebrate how far it is you've come, and how we get to honor that there's so much more to our journey to go. After all, we are ancestors in the making.
Yes, I love that. I always like to think too, what picture of mine will my daughter put on her altar?
That part, yes, yes. The pictures you've taken of me are definitely going to end up on my future grandchildren's altar, and if not my grandchildren, at least somebody, because that
Yeah.
is really when you
Hmm.
know that you have created the legacy.
Exactly.